Imagine Survivor, but everybody is holding a book and arguing about Canada. That is Canada Reads. Every year, 5 Canadian public figures choose a book that they believe every Canadian should read. They debate, vote, and then eliminate one book per day until there's only the winner standing. The 2026 Canada Reads Longlist just dropped, and here are our 15 contenders. Okay, with the lineup set, let's talk about each contender. Starting with A Minor Chorus by Billy Ray Belcourt. Belcourt is a writer and academic from the Drift Pile Cree Nation. This book follows a queer Indigenous PhD student who steps away from his dissertation to pursue writing a novel. In this unnamed narrator's novel, he tells the stories of different people in his life, whether it's one of his aunties who's having a little bit of trouble with her son being part of the prison system, res gossip, talking about powwows with his cousin, a married man who he hooks up with at a hotel. All of these in Belcourt's words to test the theory that storytelling makes us less lonely. I love the idea of this novel, and whether or not it makes it to the shortlist, I will be reading it. Belcourt has a poetry background, from what I understand, so I bet the writing is just absolutely beautiful. And I always love reading First Nation voices, and like the idea that this one has multiple in one book. Okay, next we have Celestina's House. Now, I'm not going to lie, the reviews of this one are not great. It has an average of a 3-star rating. This is about a young woman who kind of grows up in a bit of a haunted home with ghosts, and she ends up being married off to some aristocrat. And when she starts this life, these spirits follow her there. It sounds interesting enough. I love a good gothic novel, but the last time Canada Reads had a horror gothic novel in it, it did make it to the shortlist, but was unanimously voted off on day one. It was Mexican Gothic, which was a great book. I'm going to go ahead and say this won't make the shortlist just based on what happened with Mexican Gothic, and the hype isn't huge on this one either. Next, we have Crossroads by Caleb Dahlgren, and this is a memoir. Now, Caleb is the sole survivor of a very tragic event that happened in 2018, I believe. It was a hockey team traveling, I want to say in Saskatchewan, and their bus was hit by a transport truck, and he was the only survivor. And that led to quite a huge movement, especially out west, where millions of hockey sticks were being placed in people's front doors and whatnot. I think this is one of these books that would be a great recommendation for certain people. So I'm not sure if it's going to hold a place in the shortlist. I do find memoirs quite niche. Now, a memoir did win a couple of years ago, Ducks by Kate Beaton. This was a little different though, because it was a graphic novel, which was really different for Canada Reads. So it brought something fresh and new. And I'm just not sure this one will have quite the same effect. Everything is Fine by Irene Tishabe. This won the best book of 2025 with CBC Books, so I think it's definitely a contender to be part of the shortlist. This is about a young woman who goes to Uganda to visit her sister, and when she arrives, she finds out that her sister has a girlfriend. Her sister is gay in a country that has very harsh anti-homosexuality laws. The book is her journey kind of grappling with this new reality and navigating her family relationships alongside that, including the one with her sister. I think this could absolutely be part of the shortlist. It is timely and a very important, diverse perspective. I think a big part of it, however, will be dependent on who these celebrity champions end up being. Because if you don't have somebody who can speak to that experience, I think it would be hard to really stand on those massive topics. Okay, next we have Foe by Ian Reid. Now, I'm not sure if it'll make its way to Canada Reads shortlist this year. However, I absolutely do want to read it. This is a little bit older. It's from 2018, I believe, and it's sci-fi thriller. It won Best Horror in 2018. This is a bit post-apocalyptic. The world is an absolute wasteland. And it's about this farmer who has a quiet life with his wife and whatnot, but then one day he gets recruited. I believe he's sent to like outer space or something. And to replace him at the farm, the people who've recruited him have sent along somebody to keep his wife company. That's all the synopsis says. I'm going to go ahead and guess that it's like a clone of him or something. If it is, that sounds super interesting. I guess it was made into like a series or a movie or something. I have to check it out. Sounds really good, but I don't quite see it making the shortlist. Next, we have the famous Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed. I think everybody has heard something about this series at this point. This was a huge hit on Crave, I believe it was, and it's about two rival hockey players who fall in love and have to keep their romance a secret because they're hockey players. And it's just about them kind of navigating that. I wonder if it will be in the short list because of how famous it is right now. If CBC wants to be a little strategic, that might be a way to go. Romances never do well in Canada Reads, and I think we understand why. I think for a literary competition, there's just something about tropes that doesn't work in a lot of these heavier debates. Not to say the subject matter isn't important. I think obviously this book covers a topic that is close to a lot of people and one that a lot of people still have to go through today, unfortunately. And there's something to talk about with that for sure. But there are so many incredible books on this list that I think this book would just fall through the cracks like Meet Me at the Lake did last year. It's different this time, another romance on the list. I'm going to go right for it and say I don't think this will be in the short list this year. It seems extra tropey. I'm also struggling to understand how it aligns with the theme and connecting all Canadians. But again, I'm coming towards all of these books from a complete outsider's point of view. I haven't read any of them. It's a forced proximity romance. It's a woman who has no choice but to move into this brownstone in New York City with this guy, and they end up falling in love, and then they go back and forth between New York and Los Angeles. I don't see the connection to Canada. I don't see the connection to Canadian culture or relevant topics in Canada today. If you have insight on this book, let me know. I'm totally open to hearing it. I don't think I'm going to read it this year, and I also don't think it's going to be part of the short list. Julie Chen is dead. I'm going to go ahead and say right away, I think this will be on the short list for a couple different reasons. It's very trendy right now. Everybody is talking about it. It's been a huge bestseller with only raving reviews. Number two, it sounds incredible. And I think this book could cover a lot of really rich debate topics. This book tells the story of a woman whose twin sister recently passed away, and she takes advantage of the situation and pretends to be her. Now, her sister was this super famous influencer. So her twin is like living her best life, millions of followers, lots of money, designer clothes, partnerships, a social life. It's all good. But she ends up going to an influencer's event that turns dark very quickly. Now, this book is labeled as horror, as thriller. So whatever happens at this event ends up showing the twin kind of what led to her sister's death. Sounds really good and so timely. This is a top pick for me for sure. I even already bought the book. It's the only one I've done that for. Never Been Better. This one looks very interesting. Now, it is also a romance, but this one has a bit of a twist. This is the story of a bipolar woman who goes to this big, swanky, luxurious resort after coming out of psychological treatment, and she ends up falling in love. So it's about her as a newly diagnosed bipolar woman navigating what that means. I think if there is a romance to make it into the short list, this could potentially do it. Mental health is a topic that is sometimes mentioned in Canada Reads, but I think if a book like this was on the short list, it could end up being a bit more of like a rich conversation. So I wouldn't mind seeing it in there, but I don't think I'm going to have it as part of my prediction. Next, we have the Soju Oxford Club. This could be interesting because there haven't been many Korean diaspora voices in Canada Reads, and it is also of the mystery genre. And from what I remember, there hasn't been much representation of that genre either. This is about a soju club that has gathered a bunch of different people who have been somehow linked to the same North Korean crime and assassination. I think you have a detective in there, you have a spy, you have someone who was like a friend of the assassinated, and they kind of all gather to figure out what happened. Sounds really good. And I have to say, the author of this book, Jinwoo Park, has been so lovely on social media. So I think either way, I'm going to be reading the book, but for now, I'll keep it in the maybe pile for the shortlist. Restaurant Kid by Rachel Phan. This is a memoir written by Phan about her life growing up as a restaurant kid to her parents who immigrated to Canada from China during Japanese occupation. It talks about the different roles she had to play as a Chinese female child and what that meant not only in the restaurant and within her family, but also at school, what it meant to be the good daughter in what was often a very chaotic space for her. This sounds very interesting. I like the fact that it's specific to her experience growing up in a family restaurant specifically. I will absolutely read this book, and for now, I'm going to put it in the maybe pile for the shortlist. Searching for Terry Punch-Out. Now, this is interesting. Now, I love the fact that we have two Nova Scotian authors on here, Heated Rivalry and this one. It is another memoir. Now, this is the story of a man who is a Sports Illustrated journalist, I believe, but something happens and he decides to come back home to Nova Scotia, where he ends up like driving a Zamboni or whatnot. And it becomes almost this existential moment, I guess, where he starts to think about how he's becoming his parents. And from what I understand, the main message of the book is that no matter what we try to do or where we try to go, that we always end up coming home. Now, nothing sounds more Atlantic Canadian, if I'm being honest. There's this constant theme in Atlantic Canadian storytelling where we talk about home, we talk about family, and those kind of core values. So I do think this would touch a lot of people in some areas in Canada for sure, but I'm not sure about all of Canada. So I'm going to say no to this one, but I could see it being influential for some folks. Slice the Water by P.P. Wong. This is set in a dystopian world where there is mass starvation, where there is a military dictatorship, where there's a tyrannical king burning books, where anybody with disabilities is being exiled. Sounds familiar. Sounds very timely. Sounds like it should be on the short list. However, while Canada Reads can often touch on very important and timely topics, they still need to remain trendy. CBC is still both sidesing what's happening in Palestine. They do not push boundaries. They do not ask hard questions, and they are never controversial. So if this does make the short list, and I hope it does, because it would be cool if it did spark some controversial conversations, I don't know if they will risk it. Do I want it on there? I do. We'll see if it gets there. The Cure for Drowning by Logan Paylor. This has got a really good rating with over 1,000 reviews. It's at like a 4.2. That's pretty good. This is a historical coming of age novel that centers queer and non-binary characters. It looks like there's a little bit of magic realism woven in here as well, because at the beginning of the novel, there's this young farm girl who's a bit of a tomboy who falls into a frozen lake and is saved by her mother's Celtic magic. As she grows up, she ends up falling in love with this other girl in her neighborhood. Her brother is also interested in this young woman. Now, this takes place in the 1930s. So I think it's about Kit's discovery, not only with her own sexuality, but also with being non-binary. I love everything about this book. By the sounds of it, I think I will absolutely love this book. I know I'm going to read it, and I think it should be on the short list because I don't often see magic realism on there. Could offer something very different. As I'm kind of going through these, I'm realizing there's quite a few queer voices. It'll be really interesting to see how many of them make it onto the list and how that could potentially influence the questions during the debates. Finally, we have The Hunger We Pass Down by Jen Sukfong Lee. And this is the one I think I am most excited about. Jordan Peele's Us meets The School for Good Mothers in this horror-tinged intergenerational saga as a single mother's doppelganger forces her to confront the legacy of violence that has shaped every woman in her family. I love horror. I love intergenerational sagas. I love complex female relationships. I love female rage. And this is giving me all of those and more. I need to read it yesterday, and I really want it on the short list. Not only because it's horror and I would love to see a horror novel go through, but it's also representing generations and generations of women's voices, specifically immigrant women in Canada. Okay, so after all of that, if I had to narrow it down to 5 books out of all of these that I would want to read the most and that I think are the most timely and could offer up some really rich debates, I'm going to go with Everything is Fine Here, Julie Chen is Dead, Slice the Water, The Hunger We Pass Down, and in the 5th spot, I'm debating between 2 here. I think A Minor Chorus should have that 5th slot. But I also think The Cure for Drowning could offer up something different. These are the 5 I am going with. Do you agree? What would you switch up? Either way, there's more than 5 here that I'm really looking forward to reading. Let's check back after the 22nd to talk about that shortlist.